Rain carved silver scars down the glass walls of Manhattan. From the 42nd floor, the city pulsed below like circuitry. Brilliant, relentless, indifferent. Ethan Vale, criminal defense attorney, stood by the window with a glass of Lagavulin, watching sirens crawl through the wet avenues. His office smelled of leather, ink, and exhaustion. Success had a scent when mixed with insomnia. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vale, there's a woman here to see you," said his secretary, voice trembling. "She refuses to give her name." Ethan checked the clock. 11:52 p.m. He liked people who came late. Desperation made them honest. "Send her in." A minute later, the elevator opened, spilling in a draft of rain and a woman who looked both ruined and composed. Her dark coat dripped onto the marble floor. Her hair clung to her cheekbones. Clara Monroe, though he didn't know the name yet. She moved like someone used to commanding rooms, until recently. "I need your help," she said. "They're going to destroy me." Ethan motioned to the chair opposite his desk. "Start with who they are." She hesitated. Then, "Helixis Biotech, my company. They say I falsified clinical data. They're lying." Ethan's eyes flicked to the headlines scattered across his tablet. Helixis had been the golden child of Wall Street until a week ago. Now it was bleeding investors, accused of manipulating results for a cancer drug trial. The case screamed career killer. Exactly the kind he couldn't resist. "You're accused of fraud that moved billions," he said. "Either you're innocent, or you're spectacularly reckless." "I'm being set up," she whispered. "The data was real. Someone altered it. They want me gone." Ethan studied her. People rarely told him the truth. They sold him versions of it. But her fear had edges. Sharp, expensive, believable. "You're not here to prove innocence," he said finally. "You're here to survive." Her eyes lifted. "Can you make that happen?" He poured her a drink. "For the right price, I can make anything happen." That was the moment the deal was sealed. Not with trust, but with mutual necessity. 3 nights later, Ethan's office looked like a war room. Files on Helixis sprawled across the table, altered spreadsheets, missing lab logs, deleted metadata. His team traced the digital tampering to an internal account. An employee who didn't exist. Convenient. Too convenient. The deeper he dug, the stranger it became. Clara's payment to his firm hadn't come from Helixis. The transfer originated from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. A company registered only 3 weeks earlier, under a name that made him freeze. Ethan Vale Holdings Limited. Someone had opened a shell corporation in his name, and used it to move money. His money. He confronted Clara in her Brooklyn loft. Rain dripping from his coat. "Where did you get the payment details?" he demanded. She blinked, confused. "Your assistant sent them. Noah Kent." He said it was urgent. Noah. 27. Brilliant. Hungry. Ethan had dragged him from obscurity. Taught him everything. How to charm juries. How to twist a clause until it begged for mercy. Loyalty had seemed absolute. Until that moment. When the city slept, Ethan returned to his firm. He bypassed security protocols, entered the server room, and pulled up internal logs. What he found turned his stomach cold. Forged contracts with his digital signature, falsified memos authorizing illegal transfers, and buried deeper, an encrypted thread of messages between Clara Monroe and Noah Kent. He won't see it coming. Once the trial begins, Ethan takes the fall. Ethan read the line twice, jaw tightening. He scrolled further. The last message contained a video attachment. Security footage from 2 weeks earlier. Noah entering Ethan's private office at night, not alone. Beside him was a tall man in a navy coat, face half lit by the monitor's glow. District Attorney Marcus Hale, the prosecutor assigned to Clara's case. Ethan's reflection on the screen looked ghostly, hollow-eyed. Outside, thunder rolled over the East River, and somewhere below, a siren wailed like a warning. He understood, with a clarity that hurt, that the trial hadn't even started, and he was already the defendant. Morning came reluctantly to New York, as if even the sun was hesitant to shine on a city that never confessed. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat in the dim light of his office, the glow of his laptop flickering across his face. The file containing Noah's betrayal played again and again, each repetition cutting deeper. He had defended murderers, brokers, politicians, but betrayal was different. It came wearing your own reflection. By 8 a.m., his law firm hummed with its usual rhythm, secretaries whispering, paralegals running caffeine through their veins, phones ringing with problems that could be fixed for a price. But Ethan's world had shifted. Every face looked like a potential accomplice. Every whisper sounded like evidence. When Noah arrived, smiling, coffee in hand, Ethan's pulse hammered. "Rough night?" the younger man asked. "You look like you've been cross-examined by God." Ethan forced a smile. "Something like that." He watched Noah cross the room, place the coffee on his desk, boot up his computer. Everything looked normal. Ordinary. That was what terrified him most. Ethan needed to know how deep the betrayal ran. If Noah and the DA were working together, this wasn't just a frame job. It was a dismantling. Someone wanted him erased. He texted an old contact, Lydia Crow, a private investigator who had once been his lover and occasionally his conscience. Her reply came minutes later. "Meet me where you first lied to me." That meant the bar on Delancey. The bar smelled of bourbon and secrets. Lydia sat in the corner booth, boots on the seat, cigarette unlit between her fingers. Her eyes scanned him like a scanner, reading damage. "You only call me when you're drowning," she said. "I'm not drowning," Ethan replied. "I'm being buried alive." He handed her a flash drive. "I need a trace. Find out who created that shell company, and who fed Noah to the wolves." She studied him. "And what are you going to do while I dig?" He finished his drink. "I'm going to act like nothing's wrong." That afternoon, Ethan joined Clara in a glass-walled conference room at Helix's headquarters. The company's board members sat stiffly, their legal counsel eyeing him with distrust. Clara looked polished again, hair pinned, voice calm, but her eyes darted too quickly, like a chess player, afraid to look at the board. "Mr. Vale," one of the directors said, "the press is tearing us apart. You have a strategy." Ethan smiled. "I always have a strategy." He outlined a narrative, a rogue employee, falsified data, Clara as victim. As he spoke, he noticed Clara avoiding his gaze. Her hand trembled slightly when she signed a document. After the meeting, he caught her arm. "Anything you want to tell me?" She hesitated. "You said you'd protect me, Ethan. Do that, and I'll tell you everything after the trial." It was a promise he didn't believe. Night returned with thunder. Lydia called. "Your shell company was created by a firm in Zurich, the same firm that handled accounts for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office 5 years ago." Ethan gripped the phone. "You're saying the DA funded it?" "I'm saying your name was the camouflage. Someone high up wants a conviction so clean, it'll look like justice." As the call ended, he stared at the city below, lights flickering like court exhibits. He understood the brilliance of it now. The DA wasn't after Clara. He was after him. Ethan Vale, brilliant, ruthless, ungovernable, had made too many enemies in too many courtrooms. Someone was turning the chessboard upside down. He returned to his office near midnight. The cleaning crew had already left. The silence felt staged. He noticed his desk drawer open by an inch. Inside lay a single envelope. No stamp, no mark. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, a still image from the security camera in his office. The same footage he'd seen of Noah and the DA. But now there was a third figure at the door, blurred, but unmistakable. Clara Monroe. Ethan's breath caught. She had been there the night the setup began. He leaned against the desk, the pieces falling into place, with the weight of inevitability. Clara wasn't the victim. She was the key, and she had hired him not to save her, but to anchor the trap. Outside, the city continued to hum, unaware that one of its sharpest attorneys was now cornered in his own maze. Ethan poured himself another drink, the liquid catching the light like blood in a glass. For the first time in his career, he didn't know if he was the hunter or the prey. The next morning, the city looked washed but not clean. Manhattan had that particular brilliance it wore after a storm, like guilt pretending to be purity. Ethan walked through the courthouse lobby, his reflection fractured in the marble floor. He wasn't there for Clara's hearing. He was there to watch Marcus Hale, the district attorney, who had just declared war. Hale was surrounded by cameras, reporters firing questions like bullets. He smiled that politician's smile that never reached the eyes. Justice will not be intimidated by wealth or influence, he said. Not by CEOs, not by lawyers who think they're untouchable. Ethan felt the words like a knife pressed gently to his throat. Hale wasn't talking to the press. He was talking to him. Back at his office, Ethan's team buzzed with anxious energy. The Helix's case was officially moving to trial. Noah was in his glass cubicle, typing with studied calm. Every keystroke sounded like a lie. Ethan walked over. "We need to talk," he said. Noah looked up. "Sure. About Clara? About loyalty?" Noah blinked, confused, or pretending to be. "I've always had yours, Ethan." Ethan leaned closer, his tone surgical. "Then prove it. I want every message between you and Clara on my desk by noon." For the first time, Noah's composure cracked. "Why would?" "Because I said so." He turned and left before Noah could answer. If Noah was guilty, he'd panic. If he wasn't, he'd obey. Either way, Ethan would have something to measure. At noon, Noah didn't show up. By 1 o'clock, his office was empty, his computer wiped clean. Ethan's jaw tightened. The walls of his empire were closing in. He called Lydia. "He's gone." "I can find him," she said. "But you need to know something's wrong with Clara." "What do you mean?" "She's been meeting with someone outside her building. A woman, mid-40s. Expensive coat, moves like an investigator. And Clara gives her files. Lots of them." Ethan's silence was heavy. "Find out who she is." That night, Ethan visited Clara unannounced. Her penthouse was dark, except for the blue glow of a screen. She opened the door in a silk robe, calm as if she'd expected him. "Ethan," she said softly, "you shouldn't come here." "I don't do should, Clara." "Who's the woman you've been meeting?" She tilted her head. "You've been watching me. You've been lying to me." She sighed, poured herself wine, and sat on the couch. "Her name is Evelyn Shaw. She's an internal investigator for the Department of Justice. She approached me before I hired you. She said she could help." Ethan froze. "Help you, or help build the case against me?" Clara didn't answer. She just looked at him, eyes glistening with something between regret and strategy. "You think I'm the villain," she said. "But I'm not your enemy, Ethan. Hale is. He's using both of us." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Then why am I the one whose name is on every illegal transfer?" "Because you were never supposed to take the case," she whispered. "He wanted someone else, someone weaker. When you stepped in, everything changed. He couldn't stop the machine, so he redirected it." Her words hit like a confession, wrapped in poison. Later that night, Ethan sat in his car, overlooking the East River. The city's reflection shimmered on the water, fragile as the truth. Lydia's message came through. "Found your mystery woman. Evelyn Shaw used to work under Hale. She resigned 2 months ago. Rumor is, they were lovers." So that was it. The perfect triangle. The prosecutor, the investigator, and the CEO caught in between. Except Clara wasn't caught. She was balancing. Ethan's instincts roared back to life. If Hale had once trusted Evelyn Shaw, and she was now talking to Clara, there was a fracture he could exploit. He needed evidence, something undeniable. The next day, Ethan walked into the courthouse, not as a lawyer, but as a hunter. He intercepted Evelyn Shaw, near the elevators. She carried a leather folder, and an expression that said she was 10 steps ahead. "Miss Shaw," he greeted. "I hear you've taken an interest in my client." She smiled faintly. "You mean the woman you're about to lose? Depends on who's keeping score." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You used to work for Hale. Tell me something. Did he frame me before or after you slept with him?" Her smile vanished. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Vale. Then educate me." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "You think this is about you. It's not. Hale's cleaning house. He wants to become Attorney General. And you," she tapped his chest lightly, "are just a stepping stone." She brushed past him, leaving the faint scent of danger in her wake. Ethan stood in the corridor, pulse racing. For the first time, he saw the scale of the game. This wasn't about Clara's company or falsified data. It was about power, federal, political, personal, and he was in the crosshairs. That night, Lydia sent him a final message. Found Noah. He's not hiding, he's being protected. Guess who signed his safe house lease? Ethan's phone buzzed again with a photo attachment. Noah stepping out of a car, escorted by 2 men in suits. Standing beside him was District Attorney Marcus Hale. Ethan closed his eyes, anger burning clean through fatigue. He wasn't being destroyed. He was being used, and if Hale wanted a war, he'd get one. Legal, psychological, and surgical. The courtroom was about to become the battlefield. The courthouse echoed like a cathedral built for liars. Ethan moved through its corridors with the composure of a man walking into his own execution. The headlines had already crowned him villain, defense attorney, implicated in Helix's fraud. His face was everywhere on screens, in whispers, in the trembling of his firm's investors. Inside the courtroom, Marcus Hale's voice carried with measured power. Your Honor, the state requests a preliminary hearing to determine if Mr. Vale should be removed as counsel due to a conflict of interest. Ethan sat beside Clara, his expression unreadable. She looked fragile, rehearsed, her hands clenched beneath the table. When the judge addressed him, Ethan rose slowly. Your Honor, I've devoted 20 years to this court. I've faced liars, thieves, and politicians pretending to be saints. But I've never seen a prosecutor use perjury as performance art. A low murmur spread through the gallery. Hale's jaw tightened. The judge tapped her gavel. Mr. Vale, control yourself. Oh, I am, Your Honor, he said with that sharp smile. That's what frightens them. After the hearing, Ethan stepped outside into the flash storm of cameras. No comment, he muttered, pushing through the mob. Hale's voice followed him, calm, poisonous. You should have retired, Ethan. You've outlived your era. Ethan stopped, and you've mistaken ambition for destiny. For a moment, their eyes locked, 2 predators recognizing the same hunger. Then Hale smiled, the kind of smile that promised blood. Back at the firm, chaos. Clients withdrew, partners panicked, phones exploded with reporters. Ethan ignored them all. He locked himself in his office, poured bourbon, and began to write. Not a defense brief, something darker. He pulled up the file Lydia had sent that morning, bank records connecting Hale's re-election campaign to a PAC funded by pharmaceutical lobbyists. Names, dates, sums, all legal, technically, but ethically radioactive. He needed something explosive, something that would make Hale flinch. Lydia called. You really want to cross this line? I crossed it years ago, Ethan said. Now I'm just drawing the map. 2 days later, Hale received an anonymous package, a flash drive labeled for your consideration. Inside, photos of Hale with Evelyn Shaw, timestamped during her tenure at the DA's office. Hotel receipts, texts, the kind of scandal that didn't destroy a career immediately, but made it bleed slowly. Ethan watched from the shadows as the first ripples hit. Reporters asking pointed questions. Hale denying everything. Clara texting him late at night. What did you do? He didn't answer, because for the first time Hale looked uncertain, and uncertainty was where Ethan thrived. But victory was short-lived. Lydia's call came at dawn. Ethan, listen carefully. Someone's inside your system. They cloned your server. Everything, your case files, personal records, encrypted logs, it's gone. Ethan froze. Gone where? Straight to the district attorney's office. He hung up and stared at the skyline. The move was brilliant, surgical revenge. Hale had taken his strike and turned it into evidence. By noon, the Bar Association had filed an ethics complaint. By evening, federal investigators were in his lobby, and through it all, Clara remained silent, unreachable. That night, Ethan found a single message waiting on his desk. A handwritten note, no signature. You're not the target anymore, you're the weapon. He drove to Lydia's apartment on impulse. The city was half asleep, rain whispering against the windows. Lydia opened the door before he could knock. You shouldn't be here, she said. I'm out of moves. You're never out of moves. You're just afraid the next one will damn you. He smiled weakly. Maybe damnation's the only honest verdict left. She studied him, then handed him a folder. I found something. Hale didn't just frame you. He built the evidence using Helixis data, the same doctored datasets that started this whole thing. Ethan opened the folder. It contained internal memos from the DA's office, approval stamps, and a single digital signature, Evelyn Shaw's. She didn't resign, Lydia said. He cut her loose when she asked too many questions. So she's the loose end, Ethan murmured. And Hale hates loose ends. He pocketed the folder. Then I'll find her before he does. Hours later he stood outside a cheap motel in Queens, the kind that rented silence by the hour. Evelyn Shaw answered the door, eyes hollow, hands trembling. He's going to kill me, she whispered. Hale, he knows I leaked the memos. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind them. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. She looked up desperate. You can't stop him. I don't need to stop him, Ethan said. I just need to turn the jury before he can turn the gun. As he drove back into Manhattan, dawn began to rise, weak, red, and violent. The city looked like evidence under a black light. Ethan Vale had been many things. Lawyer, manipulator, savior. But now as the skyline bled into day, he understood the role he'd been cast in. He wasn't defending Clara Monroe anymore. He was defending himself against a system that wanted to erase him, and a man who had rewritten justice into theater. The trial was coming, and Ethan intended to make it the most dangerous performance of Marcus Hale's life. Manhattan shimmered under the false purity of morning light. Ethan hadn't slept again. He sat in his office, a single lamp burning, files spread like autopsy reports. The folder Lydia had given him, the one that tied Hale to falsified Helixis data, was open on the desk. Every document in it was poison, proof that Hale had built the case on a lie. But proof, Ethan knew, was never enough. It had to be weaponized. His phone buzzed. Clara Monroe. Her message was simple. We need to talk, alone. He hesitated before replying. Where? Pier 47, midnight. The place was a graveyard of ships and secrets. He pocketed the phone. Every instinct screamed trap, but instinct was a luxury he'd long ago traded for strategy. At midnight, fog rolled across the East River like a curtain lowering on Act 1 of a tragedy. Clara stood by the railing, coat wrapped tight, eyes searching the water. When she turned, her face was softer than he remembered, tired, human. Thank you for coming, she said. You made it sound like I had a choice. I did. She handed him a small drive. Everything Hale has on you. He kept backups off-site. I stole this from his private archive. Ethan didn't take it. Why? Because you were right, she said quietly. This was never about me. Hale wanted you. But there's more, something I didn't tell you. He folded his arms. Then tell me. Her voice broke slightly. The falsified data at Helixis. It wasn't Hale's idea. It was mine. Ethan felt the world tilt, just slightly. You? She nodded, trembling. The cancer drug was real, but results were slow. Investors were leaving. Hale promised protection, said if we manipulated a few trials, he could make it disappear in court. I thought he'd keep his word. Instead he built his career on it. So you sold him the lie, Ethan said coldly. And he sold me the corpse. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know he'd use your name. He wanted someone public, someone untouchable. I didn't think he'd choose you. He stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. You used me to clean your conscience. That makes us partners in perjury. She whispered, I'm sorry. He smiled, a razor-edge smile that didn't reach his eyes. No, you're not. You're scared. There's a difference. When Ethan returned to his car, he didn't start the engine immediately. He stared at the flash drive, turning it over in his hand. Clara's confession changed everything. Hale's corruption was real, but now he held something more volatile. Proof that his own client had committed the original crime. He could destroy Hale, or himself. Lydia called. You met her? Yes. And? She's guilty. But so am I. That's not news, Lydia said. What matters is what you'll do with it. Ethan didn't answer. The fog outside seemed alive, curling around the car, like judgment. The next day, Ethan walked into the courtroom like a man, stepping onto thin ice. Hale was already there, flanked by assistants. The air between them felt charged, almost intimate. Two men who understood the other's darkness too well. "Mr. Vale," Hale said, "I hope you plan to cooperate with the investigation. I'd hate to see your reputation suffer further." Ethan leaned in. "You built your reputation on the corpses of truth. I'm just making sure yours gets an autopsy." Hale's smile faltered. "Careful. You're one motion away from disbarment." "Then you'd better file it fast," Ethan replied, "before your own evidence vanishes." He turned and walked away, leaving Hale staring after him. That night, Ethan met Lydia in a diner near 14th Street. The neon light flickered red and blue against the rain-streaked window. "I've gone through the data Clara gave you," she said. "It's real." Hale kept detailed records, payments, directives, even his communications with Clara. "But there's something worse." She slid a photo across the table. A man in a hospital bed, pale, wired to machines. "Who is he?" Ethan asked. "Dr. Evan Richter, chief researcher at Helixus. He's the one who discovered the falsification. The one who tried to blow the whistle. Hale had him discredited, and then disappeared him into a rehab facility. He's still alive, barely." Ethan studied the photo. "If he testifies, it ends everything," Lydia finished. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we bring him out." But as he stepped out into the night, his phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. "You're too late. Richter's gone." Attached a single image. A morgue tag. Richter's name on it. Ethan's stomach turned cold. A voice behind him said, "You should have left it alone." He spun around. Noah Kent stood across the street, half hidden by the fog, face pale under a streetlight. "You don't understand," Noah said, voice trembling. "He's going to erase everyone. Me, Clara. You, anyone who knows." Ethan took a step forward. "Then help me stop him." Noah shook his head. "You can't stop him. You can only survive him." And before Ethan could reply, Noah slipped into the darkness like a confession swallowed by night. Ethan stood there, rain soaking through his coat, the city pulsing around him like a living wound. Hale had tightened the circle, eliminating witnesses, burning evidence, reshaping the narrative, until only one man remained to blame. Him. But this time, Ethan Vale wasn't going to defend himself in court. He was going to prosecute back, from the shadows, with everything the system had taught him about lies, leverage, and law. The next move wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. And when the truth finally emerged, the courtroom wouldn't hold it. The morning of the evidentiary hearing was the color of ash. Outside the Manhattan criminal court, reporters gathered like crows. Ethan Vale walked through them in a tailored gray suit, calm, lethal, his briefcase carrying more truth than the court could bear. Inside it, the drive Clara had given him, the memos tying Hale to Helixus, and a single handwritten note from Lydia. "Use it, only if you're ready to burn everything." The courtroom was packed. Hale sat at the prosecution table, flanked by assistants, jaw tight but eyes confident. He'd survived scandals before, but this time, Ethan had come not to defend, but to attack. When the judge entered, silence fell. "State of New York versus Clara Monroe," she announced. Ethan rose. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense moves to introduce supplemental evidence of prosecutorial misconduct." Hale's head snapped up. "Objection. Defense is grandstanding." Ethan smiled. "Not yet, Marcus. That part comes later." He plugged in the flash drive. The courtroom screens flickered to life. Emails, memos, payment trails, all bearing Hale's signature. The gallery gasped. Hale went pale. "Your Honor," Ethan said evenly, "these documents indicate that the prosecution fabricated evidence and manipulated data originating from the Helixus Corporation. My client's alleged crimes were engineered by the state." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Hale." Hale stood, voice steady but brittle. "These materials are forgeries." "Then you won't mind authenticating them," Ethan said. He handed over the chain of custody records, notarized and sealed by Lydia's investigator license, every stamp legal, every lie exposed. For one exquisite second, Ethan felt power return, the intoxicating certainty that truth, twisted correctly, could cut through anything. Then Hale spoke. "Your Honor, this is an elaborate deception, orchestrated by the defendant's counsel to distract from new charges being filed, against him. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's pulse spiked. What charges? Hale's smirk was surgical. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. Unauthorized access to government databases. You didn't think we'd ignore your little investigation, did you? Two federal marshals stepped forward. The courtroom froze. Mr. Vale, one said, you're under arrest. Clara gasped. The judge pounded the gavel. Order. Ethan didn't resist. He lifted his hand slowly, eyes locked on Hale's. You really think this ends with me in cuffs? Hale leaned closer, voice low. It ends when you stop breathing my air. An hour later, in a holding cell beneath the courthouse, Ethan sat alone. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. He replayed every move, every risk, every calculation. Somewhere above, Hale was rewriting the story again. Footsteps approached. Lydia appeared at the bars, trench coat soaked. You made the news, she said softly. They love a fallen hero. Tell me you backed up the files, Ethan said. She nodded. But Hale's people seized the servers. We're ghosts now. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then we use ghosts. What's the plan? Get me out. Quietly. You can't bribe your way out of federal custody. He looked up, eyes burning. Who said anything about bribery? That night, as thunder rolled over the city, a clerk from the Attorney General's office walked into the evidence room carrying an official warrant. Within minutes, Ethan's laptop and case files were gone, signed out to Special Agent L. Crow. By morning, Ethan Vale was released on procedural grounds, a glitch in the paperwork. Hale knew exactly who caused it. When Ethan walked out, the reporters shouted questions. He said nothing. Lydia waited by the car. That bought you 48 hours, she said. That's all I need. To do what? Put the truth on the record. That evening, Ethan appeared on the Ledger, a live investigative program. Cameras rolled. The anchor introduced him as the disgraced attorney at the center of the Helixis scandal. Ethan leaned forward, calm and precise. You've heard Hale's story, he said. Now hear mine. He outlined the corruption, the falsified data, the cover-up. He named names. And as he spoke, Lydia uploaded the verified documents to an encrypted public server. The files spread like wildfire. Hale's emails, Clara's confessions, the suppressed testimony of Dr. Richter. By the time the broadcast ended, Hale Gate was trending nationwide. But Ethan knew victory in the media was temporary. Hale still controlled the courtroom, and the bodies that guarded its doors. 2 nights later, Ethan returned to his office to find the door ajar. Inside, everything was silent. His instincts prickled. He reached for the lamp, and froze. Clara Monroe sat behind his desk. You shouldn't be here, he said. I came to warn you, she whispered. He's not done. He never is. She slid a folder across the desk. This is the last piece. It's from Evelyn Shaw. Ethan opened it. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of Hale meeting with corporate lobbyists, dates aligning with the Helixis manipulation. Proof enough to bury him. Where's Evelyn now? Ethan asked. Clara's voice was barely audible. Dead. Car crash. Last night. Ethan closed the folder slowly. Then we finish it ourselves. Outside, lightning fractured the skyline. Inside, 2 conspirators stared at each other. One broken by guilt, the other sharpened by it. For the first time, Clara asked, Do you even believe in justice anymore? Ethan poured 2 drinks. Justice isn't real, he said. But revenge can be documented. He raised his glass. To tomorrow's verdict. The trial began under stormlight. Outside, the sky cracked open above Manhattan. Rain falling in sheets so heavy the courthouse seemed to float in shadow. Inside, the gallery overflowed. Reporters, jurors, onlookers drawn by the scent of ruin. They had come to see Ethan Vale burn. But when he entered the courtroom, cufflinks gleaming like silver blades, the silence that followed was not hatred. It was anticipation. At the prosecution table, Marcus Hale adjusted his tie. He looked immaculate, unshakable. The storm belonged to him, or so he believed. Ethan stood, calm, controlled. Ready for war? Hale murmured. Ethan smiled. Already over, Marcus. You just haven't read the verdict yet. The judge entered. The state of New York versus Clara Monroe, she said, her voice echoing across the marble chamber. Counsel, proceed. Hale began with confidence. He painted Clara as manipulative, reckless, a corporate deceiver who had corrupted data for profit. His tone was polished, persuasive, lethal. Each exhibit projected on the courtroom screens cut into the jury like a scalpel. Then Ethan rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Hale," he began, "in your opening statement, you said my client falsified evidence. Would you mind explaining this email?" He gestured to the monitor. It displayed a message sent from Hale's own account, approving the very data Helixis had doctored. A ripple of confusion spread through the courtroom. Hale recovered quickly. "A forgery," he said. "A desperate tactic." Ethan clicked again. Another email appeared, then another, and another, each authenticated by federal timestamp, each signed, digitally and legally, by Marcus Hale. Ethan's voice sharpened. "Would you also call these forgeries, counselor? Because if so, your own digital signature is committing perjury." Hale stood abruptly. "Objection. Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Vale, confine yourself to the evidence." "Oh, I am," Ethan replied, turning to the jury. "And so is he." As the tension thickened, Hale's calm began to fracture. His assistant leaned in, whispering frantically. Hale's knuckles whitened. "Your Honor," he said, "I request a recess." "Denied," the judge replied. Ethan moved to the defense table, lifted another folder, and held up a photograph. "This is Dr. Evan Richter, the man who discovered the data manipulation and tried to expose it. He's dead now. Car crash, last week. The police report says it was an accident, but the car's brake lines were cut." The jury stirred. "And the mechanic who filed the report," Ethan continued. "He worked for a company linked directly to a campaign donor of Marcus Hale." Hale shot to his feet. "That's slander." "It's evidence," Ethan said. "And there's more." He walked toward the bench, voice low, almost intimate. "For months the prosecution has presented a story about corporate greed, but the real story is simpler. Power. The power to invent guilt, to bury truth, to kill for silence." He turned to Hale. "And you wrote it." For a heartbeat, the room was still. Then Hale's assistant's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her face went white. On the courtroom screens a live feed appeared. Lydia Crow's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, you are now seeing real-time data from the district attorney's backup server. Every file Marcus Hale deleted, every payment he concealed." The gallery erupted. Hale lunged toward the monitor. "This is illegal." Ethan's tone was calm, surgical. "So was framing me." Security moved in, chaos spreading through the courtroom. The judge shouted for order, but the storm outside drowned her voice. Hale turned to Ethan, fury blazing. "You think this saves you?" "No," Ethan said softly. "It ends you." Moments later, U.S. Marshals entered, flanking Hale. One of them handed the judge a document. She read it silently, then looked up. "Mr. Hale, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Gasps filled the air. Hale's composure shattered. "You can't. This is my courtroom." "Not anymore," Ethan said. As Hale was led away, he twisted toward Ethan. "You don't win this," he hissed. "You just survive it." Ethan watched him go. "Survival," he murmured, "was never my goal." Hours later, when the courthouse emptied, Ethan stood alone in the rain-soaked hallway. The verdict had not yet come, but everyone knew it. Clara would walk free. Hale's empire had collapsed. Clara approached him quietly. "You saved me." He turned to her, weary but composed. "No. I just traded your sentence for his." Her eyes softened. "You could have destroyed me too." "I still might," he said. "Depends on how long you stay honest." She smiled faintly. "You really don't believe in redemption, do you? Redemption's a myth. The law just sells prettier names for it." She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "Go, Clara. Start over. Before the truth catches up again." Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline. Reporters shouted his name, flashbulbs exploding like verdicts. Ethan walked past them, into the downpour. No umbrella, no smile. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, a familiar chorus. He glanced at the courthouse one last time, then at the city that had made him and tried to destroy him. The rain washed over his face, erasing everything except resolve. Ethan Vale had survived, but the war for justice wasn't over. It had just changed sides. The city didn't celebrate Hale's fall. It watched it, hungrily, the way it watched every downfall. like entertainment. Screens across Manhattan replayed the footage of his arrest, the slow-motion humiliation of a man who'd once been the law itself. For 24 hours, Ethan Vale was the headline hero, the lawyer who'd beaten corruption with its own weapon. By the third day, the news cycle moved on. Heroes were only useful until they stopped bleeding. Ethan sat alone in his office, surrounded by silence. The blinds were drawn, the bourbon half gone, the phone unanswered. His firm was in disarray, partners distancing themselves, clients withdrawing retainers, sponsors pretending they'd never known him. Victory, he realized, came with the same emptiness as guilt. Lydia entered without knocking. "You look like hell. I feel like a sequel no one asked for," he muttered. She tossed a newspaper on his desk. The headline read, "Hale found dead in holding cell. Suicide or silenced." Ethan's pulse faltered. When? 2 hours ago. Before he could be transferred to federal custody. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. No way he hung himself. He was too proud. Lydia nodded. "The official line says suicide. But Hale had information that could ruin people above him. If he talked, others would fall." Ethan exhaled. So someone made sure he didn't. That night, Ethan walked the East River Promenade alone. The air was cold, the water black, the city reflected upside down, a mirror of its own sins. For a moment, he almost felt peace. Then he heard footsteps behind him. "Clara, you shouldn't be out here," she said softly. "It isn't safe." And somewhere between Wall Street and Washington, a single question began to spread. Who was Ethan Vale working for? You watched it all from a motel room in Jersey City, curtain half closed, whiskey half gone. His laptop sat open on the bed, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Every channel displayed his face, his triumph twisted into a threat. The knock came at 3:12 a.m. He didn't turn. "Neither is telling the truth. But I've gotten used to it." She stepped beside him, coat fluttering in the wind. "I came to say thank you. The charges are gone. The company's broken, but I'm free." "You're not free," Ethan said. "You're just unpunished." She winced. "You really can't let go, can you?" He finally looked at her. "You asked me to save you. I did. But the cost of saving a liar is believing the lie yourself." Clara's voice trembled. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. All of it." Her silence stretched. Then quietly, "Hale wasn't the one who killed Richter. It was a contract. My board paid for it. They couldn't risk exposure. Hale only covered it up." Ethan felt the world tilt again.
"You knew?"
"I tried to stop them." "But you can't fight corporations, Ethan. They're better at hiding murder than the mob ever was." He stared at her, realization hardening. "You didn't come to thank me. You came to make sure I never talk." She took a step back. "If you release everything you have, we'll both go down." "Gee, think carefully." He smiled faintly. "I already have." Later that night, Lydia met him in a parking garage beneath the firm. She held a small flash drive. "This is everything," she said. "Emails, financials, Clara's board. It ties them to Richter's death and Hale's payoff." Ethan looked at it, the weight of it almost physical. "If this goes public, it ends Helixus. It ends her." Lydia's gaze didn't waver. "You said once that justice wasn't real. You still believe that?" He hesitated. "Maybe not, but vengeance leaves better evidence." "Then you already know what to do." She turned to go, then paused. "Just remember, when the world sees the truth, they won't see the difference between you and them." He nodded. "That's the point." Dawn. Ethan stood on the rooftop of his building, city lights fading into gray. He opened his laptop, inserted the drive, and uploaded the files. The progress bar crawled forward. 1%, 10%, 47%, each percentage another nail in the coffin of everyone who'd ever tried to own him. When it reached 100%, he closed the lid. Somewhere below, the world was already reacting. Phones buzzing, networks breaking, lawyers waking to emergencies. Helix's stock plummeted. Arrest warrants would follow by noon. But Ethan didn't watch the chaos unfold. He just stood there, wind tugging at his coat, eyes on the skyline. He had finally done it. He'd torn the system open. But what poured out didn't look like justice. It looked like infection. By evening, his name trended again. This time not as a hero, but as the man who had leaked classified files and caused a corporate collapse that wiped billions from the market. Federal agents issued a summons. Anonymous threats filled his inbox. Lydia called. "They'll come for you next." "I know." "Then run." He smiled faintly. "I don't run. I litigate." "Not this time," she said. "This time, there's no courtroom." "Then I'll make one." He hung up. That night, as sirens drew closer, Ethan packed a single suitcase. Documents, cash, a passport. His reflection in the mirror looked older, sharper, half alive. He paused, picked up the framed photo on his desk, a younger version of himself beside his first client, back when he'd believed law could fix people. He placed it face down. Outside, the city roared, with the chaos he'd unleashed. Ethan Vale had become what he'd always fought, the necessary evil, and now that the truth was free, he no longer had a place to stand. New York didn't sleep that night. It devoured the scandal like it devoured everything. Fast, loud, and without remorse. News anchors shouted over one another. Pundits speculated. Senators promised inquiries. Helix's executives were arrested at dawn, escorted out of their glass towers in handcuffs that caught the morning light like jewelry. "Room service," a voice said. He hadn't ordered any. He reached for the gun tucked inside his coat, a weapon he'd never intended to use until now. "Who is it?" Silence. "Then it's me, Lydia." He opened the door. She slipped inside, rain-soaked and pale. "They know where you are," she said. "You have maybe an hour." He nodded. "Then let's use it." They sat at the table, the city a flickering pulse beyond the window. Lydia placed a folder down. "New documents. Fresh names. This is from an anonymous source inside the Department of Justice," she said. "Apparently you embarrassed the wrong people. They're issuing a warrant. Treason. Espionage. Take your pick." Ethan laughed softly. "So I'm the criminal again. Full circle." "You crossed too many lines, Ethan. They don't forgive that." He met her eyes. "Neither do I." She hesitated. "There's one way out. Testify. Go public before they bury you. Tell the truth on your own terms." "I already did." "No, you leaked the evidence. That's not truth. That's revenge." He stared at her. "You think there's a difference?" "Yes," she said. "Truth cleans. Revenge corrodes." He looked away, jaw tight. "Then maybe corrosion's the only thing that lasts." Outside, thunder echoed over the Hudson. Lydia rose and crossed the room, stopping beside the door. "If you stay, they'll kill you. If you run, they'll call it proof of guilt." "I'm done running." "Then what?" He opened his briefcase, took out a single envelope. Inside was a notarized confession. His own. Every manipulation, every bribe, every ethical compromise he'd ever made. Signed, dated, stamped. "I send this to the press tomorrow," he said. "My sins unfiltered. Let them see everything." Lydia's voice broke. "You think that redeems you?" "No," he said. "But it makes the story complete." At sunrise, Lydia was gone. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep. When he woke, the motel television was still on. The news crawled across the bottom of the screen. Helix's co-founder Clara Monroe, found dead, apparent suicide. He stared at the words until they blurred. His pulse slowed. His mind didn't. She'd chosen her ending before he could deliver hers. Or someone had chosen it for her. Either way, it was finished. The last loose thread, cut. He poured himself another drink. It tasted like surrender. By afternoon, he was back in Manhattan, walking through a city that had already rewritten his name. His firm's doors were locked, his office stripped clean. The receptionist avoided his eyes as she handed him a single cardboard box, his legacy reduced to paperwork and dust. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb. 2 federal agents stepped out. "Mr. Vale?" He turned. Calm. "You're late." They exchanged a look. "You're under arrest." "I figured." As they cuffed him, flashbulbs erupted again. Reporters shouted questions. "Did you kill Clara Monroe? Are you the whistleblower or the villain? Do you regret it?" He paused before entering the car. "Regret?" he said. "That assumes I ever had a choice." Federal custody was colder than any courtroom he'd ever known. Concrete, steel, silence. In the interrogation room, the only light came from a single bulb above the table. A federal attorney sat across from him, young, precise, expressionless. "You've caused quite a mess, Mr. Vale. Just rearrange the truth," Ethan said. "Why leak the files? Why now?" "Because I finally learned how justice works. It doesn't exist until someone pays for it." The attorney leaned forward. "Then who should pay?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Everyone." Hours later, they left him alone. The walls hummed with fluorescent light. He took out the pen they'd allowed him to keep, his only request, and began to write. Not a defense, not an appeal. Something older, quieter. Confession. "I believed I could bend the system until it broke. I believed corruption could be outsmarted, but corruption doesn't live in laws or courts. It lives in people. And I am people." He stopped, looked at the ceiling. The hum sounded almost like rain. At 11:47 p.m., Lydia received an email. No subject, just an attachment, a scanned document titled FinalArgument.pdf. The last line read, "If truth is a weapon, then every liar deserves to bleed, including me." By morning, the Bureau released a statement. Ethan Vale had died of an apparent heart attack in his cell. No investigation pending. Lydia didn't believe it. She printed his final words, framed them, and hung them on her wall. Below she wrote, "Case closed." But deep down she knew the truth. Ethan Vale's story wasn't finished. It had just moved to a jurisdiction where justice couldn't reach. The city woke as it always did, indifferent. Wall Street screens blinked green again. Politicians rehearsed new speeches about accountability, and the public, half outraged and half entertained, moved on to the next scandal. But somewhere above the skyline, on the 42nd floor of a building once owned by Vale and Kent LLP, a single light burned through the dawn. Lydia Crowe stood in Ethan's old office. The room had been stripped bare, but the ghost of him remained. The faint smell of scotch, the imprint of a chair, the rain-streaked window he used to stand before while dissecting the world. On his desk she placed the framed page of his final argument, the one she'd printed from his last email. It read, "Justice is not blind. It just looks away when the price is high enough." She stood there for a long time, watching the city's reflection move across the glass, wondering if somewhere beneath the noise and corruption, Ethan's ghost was still arguing his case. A month later, the Department of Justice reopened the Helixis investigation, not because of morality, but because of optics. Hale's death had triggered a political avalanche. Committees formed, hearings opened, and names once untouchable began to appear in subpoenas. Ethan Vale became a symbol, half hero, half traitor. Protesters carried his quotes on cardboard signs. Law students wrote theses about his moral revolution. His reputation split like a verdict with two truths, one that damned him, one that sanctified him. Lydia watched it all from afar. She never corrected the stories. Some said he died of guilt. Others whispered he was still alive, hiding somewhere offshore under a different name, building another empire. She didn't believe in ghosts, but sometimes she heard his voice when the city rained. Justice isn't real, Lydia, but evidence lasts. One evening, she received a package. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive, and a note written in Ethan's handwriting. "You were right. Revenge corrodes, but sometimes it polishes the mirror first." Her heart raced. She inserted the drive into her laptop. It contained a single video file, grainy, time-stamped 2 days after his supposed death. The footage showed Ethan sitting at a desk in a dimly lit room, alive, thinner, eyes haunted but steady. "If you're watching this, Lydia," he said, "then the Bureau bought the story. I had to die to stay free. The files I leaked weren't the whole truth. There's another layer, names even Hale didn't know. They built the system we tried to break. I'm not done yet." He paused, almost smiled. "Tell them I'm still practicing law, just under a different jurisdiction." Then the video ended. Lydia sat in silence, the city buzzing beyond her window. Part of her wanted to destroy the file, to let the dead stay buried, but the world outside hadn't changed. The same men still wrote the same laws, using the same ink made from someone else's blood. She whispered to the dark, "You always did love an encore, Vale." Then she opened a new email, attached the file and addressed it to every major news outlet in the world. The subject line read, "Exhibit A." The next morning Manhattan woke to chaos again. News anchors scrambled. Politicians denied, and the legend of Ethan Vale resurrected. The footage spread like wildfire across screens, subways, phones. Some called him a criminal mastermind. Others called him the conscience the system deserved. No one called him gone. Weeks later, in a cafe on the Amalfi Coast, a man sat alone reading the newspaper. His beard was longer, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses, but the smirk was unmistakable. The headline, "The Ghost Lawyer Speaks from the Grave." He folded the paper neatly, set down a few euros, and stepped into the sunlight. The sea spread before him, blue and endless, a horizon wide enough for reinvention. He made a call on a disposable phone. "It's done," he said. "Tell them I'll take the case." A pause, then a voice on the other end. "Mr. Vale, who's the client this time?" He smiled faintly. "Justice." He ended the call, slipped the phone into the surf, and walked down the shore as the tide erased his footprints one by one. Back in New York, Lydia received a final envelope. Inside was a single photo. Ethan, on that same beach, coat over his arm, eyes turned toward the horizon. On the back, handwritten in ink that had bled through the paper, were 4 words: "The case never ends." She smiled through tears, placed the photo beside his framed confession, and whispered, "Objection overruled." Outside, thunder rolled once more over Manhattan, soft, distant, like applause from the gods. And for a moment, just long enough to feel real, it sounded like justice laughing.